Okay, thanks, Alfie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Morland House and Talbot Grove refurbishment meeting. My name is Bimi Shakuni. I'm the refurbishment design and delivery project manager at Lancaster West Neighbourhood Team, and I'll be chairing the event this evening. I'd like to thank you all for coming. Lorena, next slide, please.
Hello, can I just speak to the chair, please?
Yes.
Hi, this meeting was due to start at 5 p.m. and it's taken me a few minutes to get in, and you've already started the meeting. I'm just a little bit worried that maybe others need to join.
Andrea, we just started the meeting. Yeah.
So
we have, sorry,
so
carry on.
It sounded like you were going through some details when I joined. I don't know what I've missed.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just, saying, people should mute themselves if they're not speaking. And we haven't started the meeting. We're just about to. Yes. Andrea, you haven't missed anything.
Okay, are you Bumi Shakoni?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Andrea.
I know that some of the residents of Talbot Grove House are having difficulty getting in at the moment.
Everyone is in now. No one is waiting in the to come in. Yep. So I'm going to carry on. I'm going to start off with a quick introduction to the Lancaster West team working on the external refurbishment of your estate. That's the outside of the buildings themselves, the communal spaces, landscaping, and many of you will have met James Caspel, our neighborhood director, and also here today we've got Andres Luiso, who is the head of refurbishment design and delivery, Alfie Peacock, our refurbishment design and delivery officer, and there's also Janet Hall, who is the HIP network engagement manager. You'll probably hear from most of us before the end of the evening. Next slide, please.
And from our side,
yeah, sorry, I'll just carry on. So the meeting will last an hour and a half and will run as follows. Lancaster West Neighbourhood Director James Caspel will give a brief introduction, and it'll be followed by ECD Architects. I'm going to let Loriana introduce the team. So ECD Architects they are the designers working on the refurbishment of your block. And we'll go through the key issues identified in the existing blocks. That would be based on your top 10 priorities, and they'll also go through the possible improvements, and they will be followed by Janet Hall, who will introduce the HIP network. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions and share your views, so feel free to put your questions and comments in the chat or raise your hand to ask directly. Just for any latecomers, a little bit of housekeeping. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our communication channels for residents unable to attend, as I said earlier. And I'll ask everyone to keep their microphones on mute unless they're speaking. I mean, we do encourage a camera on policy, so if you're comfortable with that, please do turn on your cameras on. And especially if you're speaking. So without further ado, I will hand over to James Caspel.
Wait, should we introduce ourselves? Bumi.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So maybe we can start, James, if we can start with you, James Trainer. James Trainer, hello. Oh, he's frozen. Oh, something. Okay, yeah. So I will introduce James. Our James, James Trainer is the managing director of ECD Architects, and he's here today, although with some technical problems I can see. And I'm Loriana Padron, and I'm associate director and head of sustainability at ECD Architects. And I'll let the rest of the team to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Linda, and I'm senior architect at ECD Architects, and I'm on the project as well with Loriana and James, the team.
Hello, I'm Louise. I'm also senior architect on this project with Linda, James, Loriana, and Jess.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess. I'm an architectural assistant with ECD and our engagement lead. Thanks for coming, everyone.
And James, I don't know if you're back here, maybe yes, if you want to introduce yourself or not.
I'm sorry, I'm having some problems with internet at my end, so I can hear you, but I'm not sure you can hear me, but I'll have to switch my camera off for a little while. But I'm James, by the way. Sorry.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Firstly, thank you everybody for joining us. We recognise that there will be people who will be unable to join us for various reasons in terms of timing and obviously in terms of the platform. And a bit later in the meeting, we will talk about what we're going to do as a follow-up to today. And I suppose I just wanted to set the scene in terms of why we're meeting tonight. So firstly, I'm delighted that this is the first opportunity the ECD architects have had to meet the residents of Morland and Talbot Grove House and continue what is already been quite a long-standing and in-depth co-design conversation. About 40 residents were involved in the procurement process to choose the various design teams for what we call the different lots, but in plain English that means in terms of the different parts of the estate. And ECD are known to us as well in terms of the Verity Close Low Energy Council Home, which is the borough's first low energy council home, which many of you may have seen works going on Lancaster Road with the PV panels on the roof, the air source heat pump in the garden, and it's running off of clean green energy. So tonight is an opportunity to share the understanding based on the top 10s that many of you have participated in, building on the ideas days earlier on, and starting to bring in some of the surveys, the learning that the ECD and their team have been doing in terms of the priorities and some of the survey footage that we've secured there. And we're really about to just discuss those initial refurbishment ideas. And all we're doing tonight and we'll be doing in the following weeks is presenting possible improvements and capturing your ideas, concerns and questions. What we're not going to do is bounce anybody into making any really important decisions. These are your homes, this is where you live, and what we've learned, if we've learned anything, it's really important to engage as many people as possible, and it's really important to make sure that we hear every concern from down to what affects individual households to what as a group you would like to see from ultimately what is your refurbishment. So as we move forwards in following meetings, hopefully we'll start to narrow some of the choices which Loriana and the team are going to take you through, and we'll discuss some of those preferred options, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of them, the impact in terms of disruption, the respite needs that will need to be met, and develop those final design proposals together. Next slide, please, Loriana. So just to sort of remind ourselves, I suppose, the shared vision, so the commitment was made to deliver a 21st century model estate for social housing. It's a key commitment in the council's plan as part of the Grenfell recovery. Last January, a commitment was made for all the homes on the estate to be carbon neutral by 2030. And the key point here is about being co-designed with residents sensitively and collaboratively. You know, and that does mean being open and honest, but also respectful in terms of you know, the residents that live here and ultimately what they want to see. Next slide, please. So what I am able to do is announce some really positive news, but not the detail of it. And that positive news is that we have secured additional funding specifically for Morland House and Talbot Grove House. So what does that mean? So the scale of funding is an additional £25,000 per home. And that does mean in terms of some of the bigger ideas that came in the ideas days and captured in the ideas books, some of the top 10 priorities and some of the things that didn't even make the top 10 priorities for Morland House and Talbot Grove House are now things that we can consider. So there are things like triple glazing is now affordable. Things like mechanical ventilation is now affordable. And there's a range of other improvements which we'll be able to offer, which up until very recently we wouldn't be able to do. We'll be writing to residents with more detail as soon as we're able to. That will be in the next 2 to 3 weeks. But I want to be absolutely clear, although we've secured this funding and the basis for it is to enable a move to carbon neutrality as far as we possibly can, ultimately residents will decide. So we're going to end up having to have discussions about things like wall insulation, which, given why we're all here at least, is going to be emotive, it's going to be difficult. And I want to be absolutely clear that if residents choose not to have a form of insulation, then that is what's going to happen. From a council position, nobody is going to be forced or in any way leveraged into having things done to their blocks that they're not happy with. And I just want to make that absolutely clear, because at the same time as we've got a huge opportunity in front of us, and I think Loriana and the team have got some really exciting ideas to share. You know, I don't live on the estate, ECD don't live on the estate, you guys do. So I just want to really just make clear that we're not going to be forcing anyone to make any immediate decisions, and we'll work with you on different options to get to a place where hopefully we build a broad consensus, at least within individual blocks, if not across both blocks. So I'll start there and stop there, sorry, and hand over to Loriana to take it forward. Just in terms of questions and things, I think we've got a lot to talk about. So personally, I probably encourage questions as we go, questions in the chat, and there'll be details at the end of how we can carry on the conversation. Sorry, Loriana.
That's okay. Thank you for that introduction, James. We're really happy to be here with you all today. As I said, my name is Loriana, and I'm here to present you with some of the refurbishment ideas that we had and and some of the options for the different elements in your homes. Also, I'd like to maybe start with a slide and explain a little bit more about the differences between zero carbon and carbon neutrality, which, as James just said a few minutes ago, that's one, achieving carbon neutral homes by 2030 is one of the RBKC's and Lancaster West goals for the state. But it's also, another intention is to achieve net zero carbon homes if possible. So I'll try to briefly explain in simple terms what's the difference, because James asked me to explain this as well. So carbon neutral means that all carbon emissions from the buildings on site are offset by removing the same amount of carbon from the atmosphere, but this is done elsewhere, for example, by planting trees elsewhere, or by companies investing or councils investing in renewable energies somewhere else. On the other hand, net zero carbon means by reducing the energy demand and the carbon emissions on site first, as much as possible as a first step, and then any leftover energy that is required for the buildings on the site, it's balanced or is done by renewables, renewable energy, for example, using PVs. And it's important to understand the difference also, because what we're trying to do here is to reduce the energy demand and the carbon emissions as much as possible as part of this overarching goal for the whole state. So we're here to tell you about what it means in practical terms, all of this. So it means that you will be able to have healthier and more comfortable homes with better thermal comfort through the summer and the winter, with better ventilation and indoor air quality, with lower energy bills and leaseholder service charges, and better acoustic and soundproofing as well. And most of all, an opportunity to co-design and refurbish Talbot Grove House and Morland House to the standards that others will look to follow, and to have a really comfortable place to live. As James also mentioned, we already know what isn't working well, and we are still going through that process with further surveys that we're carrying out. And we know about your top 10 priorities for Morland House and Talbot Grove House. And we have a team both within the Lancaster West team and with other consultants that they have appointed, as well as ourselves. We are all looking into different aspects, the ones that are mentioned here. We're all working in a collaborative way to address all these issues. So the main topic of discussion today, and I think what we want to present to you today, is really to focus on the envelope of the blocks, really talk about the walls, the roofs, the windows, everything that, you know, the envelope of your blocks, and also to discuss some other aspects that we have identified so far, issues with thermal bridges, which I'm going to explain what this is, and also about the condition of the roof, of the external walkways, ventilation, etc. I just mentioned the word thermal bridge, for example, and just to explain it briefly, thermal bridges, for example, when you have a cold spot in your walls, that basically it's like a weaker point in the external walls where your heat and your heating from your home like leaves and exits and is lost through that weak point in the external walls, and that can lead to condensation, and if the internal conditions are not right in terms of humidity, it can cause more growth and other issues. So as you can see here, we're working, we're different consultants working together, trying to address all the different aspects that you have mentioned in previous events and consultation events. Could I ask that people mute themselves, or maybe this is something that Bumi can do for everyone in one go? It's just perhaps that would help. Thank you. Great. And so what we know so far, Lancaster West team has been very kind in providing us with the last 6 months repairs data specifically for Morland House and Talbot Grove. And we can see here what are the main causes of concern for the different blocks. And you can see here it's a lot of issues with hot water and heating and plumbing and leaks, intercoms and electrical lighting, but also windows. And so it's important to understand that they and the other consultants and us, we're all working together, looking into all these different elements and coming up with an integrated refurbishment scheme, also involving their own internal refurbishment team, who you probably know already, as they are starting to do some kitchen and bathroom works in some of your flats. We also have data about the energy performance of your current flats. We have here a sample of not for all of them, but a sample of some EPCs, which is Energy Performance Certificate, which is a document that that the council will have for every flat or most flats, showing how energy efficient a flat is. And you can see here that most of the flats are within the band D, which is the one in yellow here. And the idea is that after the refurbishment, and it's going to be a deep retrofit, if that's what you want us to do, then the energy efficiency of the flats can improve to definitely B, and even perhaps even higher. A is sort of the best, and even some houses will perform even better than A rating. And this is just to give you sort of the broader picture of what we're trying to achieve, and it's a whole UK commitment to improve the energy efficiency of homes. And as you can see here, for example, I'm going to show some of the elements that we have identified as part of the surveys that we've been having. And you can see, for example, the single glazed sash windows that many of you may be very attached to windows and like the heritage look of the windows, and we understand that, but we also understand that some people, lots of people have complained about different aspects of those windows as well, and they have always been sort of at the top of the top 10 priorities of concerns within your flats. So other Cons, for example, is that they tend to be cold during winter, and they tend to bring a lot of overheating during the summer. They are drafty because the seals are old and not working very well. They're heavy to operate. They are not secure enough. They may be unsafe for children, catching their fingers, etc. And also maintenance issues, and they're difficult to clean. In terms of the existing walls are solid walls. That means that there's no cavity within the wall, no cavity, and therefore no insulation at all. And these type of walls are generally cold during winter, and they overheat during summer, and they have like high levels of heat loss because there's no insulation. All the heat from the different flats, they just leave to the outside very quickly. And that can be seen, for example, in a thermographic image that we have. We need to carry out more of these ones, but you can see this one as an example, seeing particularly how through the windows and through the walls themselves, this is all the heat that is sort of escaping the building every single hour and day, yes, but particularly in winter time. A refurbished home after a deep refurbishment with lots of insulation and a good envelope will result in a darker, like a dark blue type of color. I don't know if you see my my cursor here, or if you can see what I'm pointing at, but it's basically like a dark purple, dark blue color that will indicate that the walls are performing well. We have also identified with surveys that the existing roofs are in poor condition. The waterproofing it's in very poor condition and it would need replacing. They also have high levels of heat loss. There's a bit of insulation on the roofs, but not a lot and not enough. And the dormers, around the dormers, are very drafty as well, and quite poor in terms of insulation and keeping heat in. We also understand that in terms of ventilation, is basically opening and closing windows manually or operating fans. And we understand that it's difficult to regulate the flat temperatures. The flats are leaky and drafty. Also that the windows themselves are cold to the touch in cold days. And basically you are losing all the heat that the Lancaster West, the communal district system, heating system is producing all that heat, and it's being lost basically through the walls, through the windows, and through the roof at a massive rate, and we have to keep all that heat in. So before we continue, I just wanted to check with you all if is there anything else that we need to know regarding the comfort of your homes, or the things that you would like to change about the external envelope of your flat and building. And today we would like to really focus on the envelope, as I said, and not in other things that we or other consultants are looking at as intercoms or other things. So if we can focus today, we would be really happy to hear about what you have to say about your walls, your roof, windows, etc. So I will open the floor for a few minutes before we continue, because then I'm going to present some of the ideas and options that we have for these blogs. Any comments? Or...
Chris has put in the chat, looking at the repairs, what has been done to eliminate or at least minimize these issues long term? I presume that's what you're going to be going into, Loriana, later on in terms of the possible intervention improvements. Yeah?
Could I just come in on that one, please, Boomi? So it's a great question, Chris. Thank you for that. And I think we don't need to tell you that there's been years, if not decades, of underinvestment on this estate, including both of your blocks, which are built in 1930 and 31 respectively. So were built at a time when standards were very different than they are now. So ultimately, there is no way that we will be able to reduce the level of repairs demand, as we call it, from your point of view, the number of repairs you're having to report, without investing in the sorts of things which Loriana and the team are going to take us through now, in terms of new windows, a heating and hot water system. So there is a bit, whilst there could be considerable disruption, it's going to be, it's actually impossible for us to manage to keep, I mean, the heating and hot water especially, I mean, with making it yesterday on the Block Rex group, it's beyond patch repair. It needs wholesale replacement. And, you know, we could patch things up, but it would mean in a few years' time, it would all just fall to bits again. So I think some of this is, you know, yes, there might be some disruption, considerable disruption, and we'll do our very best to work with residents to address that. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, if we don't make the most of the opportunity that we've got at the moment, and let's be quite clear in terms of the level of investment this estate's been able to secure, it's probably not investment we'll be able to secure in, say, 10 years' time. So we've got an opportunity here to future-proof. So we're not just patching things up so it looks nice for a few years, but we've developed homes that will last 25, 30 years without any significant investment again. Thanks, Billy.
Does anyone else have a question, comments, thoughts on what Lorena's covered?
Can I quickly ask, so when you're talking about insulating the homes, are you actually talking about taking the homes back down to the bare brick walls and insulating them from the inside?
That I'm going to explain the different options we have in the next few minutes. So yeah.
And then quickly, in terms of the external look of the building, I was always under the assumption from when I bought my flat that it was partially listed that you cannot mess with the actual outside of the building, the brickwork. Is that not correct?
No, actually, these blocks are not listed and are not in a conservation area. And we have already had some initial discussions with the planning department and RBKC planning department, and they have confirmed this, and they have confirmed also that the external walls could be subject to change. Basically.
We want to destroy the look of the building. Okay, just thank you very much.
It's one of the options to change the look of the buildings. Yes, I'll continue. All right. Anything else before we continue with the different options, or? No.
Loretta, I think you can just continue.
Yes. Okay, great. So why upgrade your homes? As you know, as I've mentioned before, poorly insulated homes use lots of heat to keep warm, and this means expensive bills. Also, summer overheating and very cold winters is an increasing problem with climate change. Drafts and temperature swings with poor heat distribution. So for example, warm air tends to rise and you may feel like your ankles are cold, but not your head, and you have all these different swings. Or if you are closer to the window, they're very drafty. You cannot really have like a sofa or a chair next to a window because you don't feel comfortable enough. So with insulating the property, you will have like a constant and nice temperature everywhere in the flat. And also, as I mentioned before, cold spots in your walls can lead to condensation and mold growth. So that's sort of the reasons why doing this. And we also understand how your existing blocks work and how much heat is being lost by the different elements. So this is an example here. This is the case for Morland House. And you can see here how 22% of your heating is lost through the windows, 29% through the walls, 18% through the roof, and 12% through infiltration, which is basically all the different tiny gaps around the windows and vents and other basically holes around the external walls that are tiny, but they are leaking air constantly and they are not controlled in any way. The ventilation is 10%, which is your fans. And also we have here thermal bridges and doors as well, and the floor at ground floor. So you can see how the walls, the roofs, the windows, they all leak heat to the outside, and it's the major source of heat losses. And basically the heat demand of your property is what it needs, the building needs to overcome these heat losses. So the heating that's coming through the district network to heat your homes have to compensate for all these losses. And the larger the heat losses, the more energy we need to draw to heat your homes. And we need to reduce the heat losses so we can reduce the heating coming into your homes to keep to a comfortable level. And we can see here how there are different sort of funding targets and energy efficiency targets that we can refer to. And basically, I can show you here, for example, for one of the blocks in Morland House, how the existing energy demand is 240 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. And the funding that James mentioned before, to get that pot of money, basically, we need to reduce the energy demand from 240 to 50 or less. And there are also there's also another standard that's been widely adopted around the world and in the UK, of course, which is called Passive House. And it has a branch called Enerfit, say, for refurbishment. So Passive House for new builds and Enerfit for refurbishments. And that's an even lower heat demand. And it's a target that is being looked at other blocks within the state as well. And yeah, two different methodologies to achieve that, but I just wanted to put it here so you can see how the funding target is 50 and the Enerfit is either 20 or 30 or around 35, depending on methodologies used, but how basically this energy demand reduction will translate into more comfortable homes, reduce energy bills, and lesser carbon emissions. And this is the bottom line of what we're trying to do here. And to achieve this level of heating demand, that at the end is kilowatt hours, it's energy, it's heat, we need to dramatically reduce the heat losses from your properties. So all the potential measures that I'm going to explain today work together and complement each other. One work with the other, and we need to focus and tackle the improvements on your insulation, your windows, your ventilation, and your heating all together to achieve a better property in terms of, its life expectancy as well, as was mentioned before, but also in terms of comfort and future-proofing your home, because these are works that are needed anyway. So better to do it right and do it once. So in terms of possible improvements, I'm going to show you options to upgrade your windows, upgrade your roof insulation, upgrade your ventilation, and install wall insulation either internally or externally, and always non-combustible, and also an option to install ground floor insulation. Okay, I have a comment here in the chat I'm looking at, and it's quite an important one to make, just to note that the average home in the UK is approximately 140 kilowatt hours per square meter per year, and a brand new home would be approximately 50. So the funding target for this refurbishment is equivalent to a new home these days, like a brand new home from scratch, not a refurbishment. So you can see how the existing energy demand is particularly high in these properties.
Hi, Loriana, where did you get the existing demand stats from?
It was calculated using a software called PHPP, and it's quite detailed. And this is basically calculates all the heat losses from the property. This is an average and it's an approximation, but it's to a good level of detail.
How accurate is that
It's fairly accurate, yes. Yes. Well, at the moment, this was done by other consultants before us. This number here, this calculation, the 240, and at the moment we are doing our own calculations, and you know we will be able to confirm exactly.
Okay. We all want to reduce energy anyway, so
sorry.
We all want to reduce the energy demand anyway, so I suppose it doesn't matter.
Yes. Yeah. It's important to know the starting point and to see like these blocks are particularly high in terms of the existing energy demand. All right, so we have a quick game here to see if you could tell which one of these houses do you think is a super efficient, highly insulated house with triple glazed windows. If anyone would like to say, even in the chat, maybe, if you can say just 1, 2, 3, or 4 from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4 from left to right, you can say 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can see some numbers in the chat. Okay, people are saying 1, 1, 1, 3, 4, 3, 4. Anyone else? Last ones? Okay. Lots of people are saying 1. And it does, yeah, I can see why you're saying 1. Maybe because it's, I don't know, it has this this railing at the top and the windows look cleaner, maybe. Other people are saying 3, so a few people have said 3, and that's the right one. So yes, this house here, which is actually not too far away from the Lancaster West Estate, has been refurbished. That has followed a very deep refurbishment to Passive standards and Enefit. And these are triple glazed windows. And you can see here the tell sign is that even if they look exactly the same from the outside and they look like sash windows, they are actually like a tilt and turn type of window. You can see there the ones that are opened. And yeah, the residents have been there actually for 10 years, the same residents. This is social housing, and they are very happy. They love their house, and they also love the fact that they don't have to use any heating, and they are still as happy as the first month after the works, 10 years after. So I'm going to start then to look at the improvements to windows, and we have here basically at the moment we have single glazed windows, and as you know, and if we are doing the insulation works, we would recommend that you go for triple glazed windows. And these are substantially better in terms of thermal comfort, energy savings, soundproofing, and reducing energy bills. It will make your properties quiet. The windows on the inside are like warm to the touch. They prevent all these heat losses that I was mentioning before, and at the end, so they reduce your energy bills. And this would be the option to go for. And there are nowadays there are so many different options for period looking windows, replicating the type of sash operation of heritage windows. And so here you have some examples. The 3 windows in this page are triple glazed windows, and you can see how they look. They can look, and the heritage look can be retained. They are, we're not going to go into a lot of detail today, but just to say that different materials can be used. They are like hardwood timber, responsibly sourced timber, can be powder coated aluminum as well, or both, perhaps having timber on the inside and aluminum on the outside. So there are different options. And also in terms of the operation, they can be tilt and turn, or top hung, or swing type of opening options. And as I said before, they're so much better in terms of thermal comfort and to lower your bills, keep the noise out, and it's incredible how they do this. It's really a massive difference. And residents can stay in their flat during the installation. All right. In terms of maximizing fire safety, before we continue as well, just to say that an independent fire consultant has been appointed to ensure that fire standards not only meet but exceed current standards. All detailed design information and drawings will be reviewed by them and submitted to building control for approval before the start of the works. And also to say that the building regulations Part B approved document requires that all materials which are part of an external wall of buildings over 80 meters need to achieve European classification A2S1 DO or class A1. Both are like non-combustible. And ECD Architects and Lancaster West have agreed to only recommend A1 materials on external building layers wherever possible and not less than A2. So with this, what we're explaining is that we're really looking into the details of all the materials that we're suggesting here for the different elements, for the retrofit generally, and all the products. Well, we're not mentioning specific products today, but all the systems, in particular in terms of insulation, that we are mentioning today are non-combustible.
Loriana, sorry, I've just seen Andrea's put 2 excellent questions in the chat to do with the windows. So I wonder if we want to pick them up.
Okay, before we continue, that sounds like a good idea. What are they? Does triple glazed give enough benefit compared to double? Yes, I would think so, definitely. It's about the U values. So I was moving my hands a lot, and my camera is too high, and I can see no one was looking at that. So I'm sorry if I sometimes look at that. Is that because in this screen I have everyone's faces, and I have the presentation here. So I am, So what I'm trying to say is the triple glazed windows have also an air gap with specific type of gas in between the panes of the glass. And that's how they delay and prevent the heat losses and basically the transmission of heat from the inside to the outside. And the U value, which, probably we don't want to go into that level of detail, the U value, which is that sort of coefficient of transmission for the triple glazed windows compared to the double glazed, it's quite different. Let's see. Can we discuss full spectrum light for healthy homes and families? Does the gas prevent full spectrum light? I'm not sure if you are talking about the quality of the light and the full spectrum, or like the G value, how much light the G value is a different. I don't know if James, you want to discuss all these technical aspects, but perhaps we can follow up this with Andrea later as well, or like separately. But yeah, the G value is the amount of sunlight that goes inside, and there's a balance to have. If you let too much in, then your flat will be warm, but also it could potentially overheat in summer. So there's a balance to have there. I think not G value. You're not referring to the G value. Should we have a session with Andrea, or maybe so we can understand more about the question?
Andrea, do you want to come in on that one?
Hi, Loriana. I live in Talbot Grove House, and as you know, we've got the same windows in both Morland and Talbot. We have sash on all the lowest floors, and in the attic flats, we've got casement double glazed on our block. And when you talked about thermal bridging, that's the issue we have. We've got, even where we've got double glazed on the top floor, we've still got drafts because of the thermal bridges. But anyway, there's been a lot of discussion in the housing world around full spectrum light, and we are all looking to saving the planet and reducing energy demand. but a lot of the measures that we're taking to stop such heat loss can also prevent healthy growing of children. And you know, the gases inside the triple paned windows and some of the films that are being put on these windows are not allowing full spectrum light. I mean, we shouldn't all be in our houses, we should be in the park anyway, but I mean, the rest of the people,
I've never come across that, and I've been specifying
Really?
triple glazed windows for many years. I don't know, James, have you, James Trainer, sorry, have you come across this question? I've never heard about that, you know.
I can't say I have. Is it to do with films that might be applied on the outside, like you would have in a commercial office, or?
I'm not sure. I went to a couple of conventions last year, and I also went to some windows and lighting seminars, and they were talking about just letting the light in and trying not and steering away from such heavy glazing, and just, you know, understanding the balance between energy loss and full spectrum light is quite important.
Yeah, I think that might be, I think it actually might relate to the G value, which is what Loriana was suggesting, which is in that a single glazed pane of glass will have a much higher G value than a double glazed or triple glazed. And it's about the amount of light that's transmitted through the pane, and if you have a very high number, then there is a risk of overheating in the summer. But if you have a very low number, yes, it will perform better, it will reduce the amount of heat, but it might also
let's just take it offline. I'll share.
Sure.
So I've got a load of scientists and healthy home architectural type sciencey people that have created a couple of PowerPoints around it. I'll share them with you later.
Okay.
Okay. No
Thank
problem.
you. All right. And okay, so we have two completely separate options here in terms of the wall insulation. Either we do it internally or we do it externally. I actually would like people to see my hands, but like, all right. So if we are, so here, internally or externally applied, the insulation. I'm going to explain first the option for internal wall insulation. In here, we're basically saying that we have to remove the internal wall finishes to install a layer of non-combustible insulation to the internal face of the facade, and then apply new internal finishes. Could someone tell me if you can see my pointer here? If I move it, yeah?
Yeah, yes, we can see it.
Perfect, thank you. So this is a solid wall that you currently have, and the idea is then to install insulation on the inside. The insulation is the yellow bit here, and this sort of pinky color is like the finishes internally, and they will need to be applied to all the external walls and a little bit on the returns from those external walls as well, to prevent the cold spots or thermal bridges that I mentioned before. And what that would entail, you can see in that photograph, for example, it will require to sort of move out furniture, remove kitchens and bathrooms to some extent. So it's quite disruptive. And you know, from the photo, I started to mention that, but let's go with the pros for the pros first. It will improve your thermal comfort, and there are no changes to external facade. And in terms of cons, as I mentioned, the finishes to kitchens and bathrooms will need replacing, all your internal finishes as well, things that are hung on the wall, shelves, also fixed furniture. And these works are intrusive and may require some level of decants as well. And you will lose some area as well, approximately between 3 to 5% in each flat. I have a question here in the chat. What centimeter, what cm? What cm is the insulation? Will internal insulation affect the size of the rooms? The rooms are smaller as it is. Yes, exactly. So there are in terms of the thickness of that insulation, there are a few options, but they are around like 100 mil, which is about 10 centimeters. If that's sort of the question was about how many centimeters, I'm not sure if that was the question. So yes, that is one of the options. And the second option is to apply the insulation externally. And that's basically installing a layer of non-combustible insulation to cover the external face of the facade and also with a finishing layer. Could be brick slips or render or another non-combustible finish. You can see here, this is the existing solid wall. This is the amount of insulation on the outside. And these are, for example, brick slips, or could be another finishing material. And it also has some complications, but basically the works would happen outside the flats and not inside the flats. And, there will be, there will be works to do around the walkways, etc. And in terms of the pros, basically you will have also an improved thermal comfort, no impact on recent, like when you say recent are the ones that are being planned or something that you may have done already, internal kitchen and bathroom works, no internal disruption, no decant required, no internal area loss. And it will give us, it will give you and everyone here the opportunity to co-design new facades. And in terms of the cons, it's basically all the attachments on facades like downpipes, gutters, aerials and things like that will have to be relocated into the external wall. But we have already sort of confirmed with supplier that in terms of downpipes and gutters, etc., everything is sort of relocated first before applying the insulation, so there's no disruption in terms of services. Okay, there is a comment here saying if we go ahead with external insulation, it must be real brick slips. Yes, definitely. And yes, there are some like options that are like almost like a stick-on brick slip, and we're not looking into that at all. We're talking about real clay bricks that have that are mechanically fixed, and therefore they don't fall, and they are like really sturdy and
back to my inbox.
Sorry, can we mute people again, please? Yes, okay. All right, so this is another element that would ideally be also insulated, but at the moment it's just an option to discuss with you all. Well, everything is an option and we're just presenting ideas today. And one of these ideas is to insulate the ground floors from the inside of the flats. And we understand that that's massively it's a massive disruption for everyone. And that would imply applying insulation on top of the existing slab. And then that will require replacing the floor finishes, etc., which we understand is happening in some of the flats anyway as part of the whole internal refurbishment scheme. So that will improve thermal comfort. You won't have this sort of a cold ground floor slab, etc. And the other element is the insulation to the roofs. And this again can be done from the inside or can be done from the outside. So from the inside, it will require like opening the ceilings from the inside, installing a layer of non-combustible insulation between the rafters and also below the rafters. So these are the rafters, these are timbers that are supporting the roof above. And we would need to install an uncombustible insulation between the rafters, and then below another layer to prevent the thermal bridges, as well as I mentioned, like the cold point, the weak point would be where the rafter is. And this will, of course, improve thermal comfort, and there won't be any changes to the existing roof structure or the appearance from the roof from the outside. But the cons is that it's invasive. You know, a decant will be required. And more importantly, there's no improvement to the roof waterproofing condition, which needs replacing. And also because we will have to install some insulation underneath the rafters, the ceiling would be a bit lower. So having mentioned this option, really because the surveys done to date have indicated that the actual waterproofing layer on the roof needs replacing anyway, it's an option that also, because of the amount of disruption required, perhaps may not be what you would like to do, but we're presenting all options here today. And the alternative to that would be to insulate the roof from the outside, and that would remove the existing roof insulation, which also the condition reporting says that is not performing, it's not consistent, and it could be damaging sections as well. So we'll need to remove and replace that insulation and the finishes, and replace with non-combustible insulation and a waterproof layer from the outside. That will require replacing the gutters that are actually here and insulating around these areas. So it will require like a lot of technical details to move the gutters and organize these areas around the new thicker insulation and thicker roof. And may also imply that, for example, mansards that are like this, separated by a tiny gap, may need to be sort of joined together with insulation and a new nice sort of roof on top. And the good thing about this is that it will improve your thermal comfort, no ceiling height loss. The works can be done from the outside. They are not from the inside, of course. But the cons are, well, as I said, the new gutters will need to be formed, and we need to look at the timbers, at the sort of the rafters and the timber structure itself, just to make sure that it can take the new load. And that's one of the surveys that we need to undertake, ideally soon as well. Then we have, sorry, I looking, there are a few comments in the chat. Okay, this is about the type of insulation in the mansard roof, I think the last question. And yes, there is some I don't know the manufacturer of the insulation, but there is some insulation in the roof that we would recommend replacing indeed. Okay, and in terms of ventilation and heating, the Lancaster West team are looking at options to renew the whole district heating system. And also if with either internal wall insulation or external wall insulation, if either of those options are actually progressed with, then we also need to look at a mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, which is the MVHR that you may have heard in the past. And this is a unit, like a fan, a bit bigger than your usual fans, that will need to be fitted into all flats individually, and that will improve the ventilation and will provide, in a way, like a sort of base heating into each flat. What it does, this mechanical ventilation with heat recovery unit, what it does is that it will bring fresh air constantly into your home, and you can see here the arrows. But at the same time, even without touching the air, like basically the air itself, the air don't touch, but they transfer the heat. So the warm heat from the inside of your flats will go through the machine, be extracted to the outside, and the temperature will be transferred to the incoming fresh air, and you will have a constant supply of preheated fresh air, and all your stale air from the inside of your flat with, you know, smells and things, etc., from your cooking or anything, that will be extracted, and with the humidity, etc., that will be extracted to the outside. And that is particularly good in terms of better air quality, because then you have fresh filter air all the time. In winter, for example, when we tend not to open our windows, not to lose the heat, and therefore the quality, the air quality inside our properties decline, even if we don't notice it, in terms of CO2, in terms of humidity. And this can be particularly bad. I mean, having this level of humidity and mold spores, etc., can be particularly bad for people with respiratory diseases and vulnerable people. So having an MVHR has been proven to massively improve air quality inside flats, and it's something that we really advocate for. And basically also the heat demand will be reduced, resulting in less energy required to heat your homes. Because at the moment, if you have a traditional extract fan, what it does is that it's just chucking the air out, and it like, you know, sucking the air out to the outside constantly. And with that goes your heating, your all the heat that has been going into your home from the district energy system, it will just go out through the fan to the outside, and it's just lost. So the idea is that that heat is recovered with this unit. And so in terms of cons, they have to be mounted either on a ceiling or in a cupboard. So there are some space implications, and we're looking at options to do that. And for that, we will also need to have a better understanding of your homes from the inside. And for that, we need an internal measure survey. I will come to that later on. And there are some disruptions, of course, with the installation, but residents can remain in their flats, and most of all the ducting required may happen in the internal corridors anyway. So, you know, maybe that the internal corridor ceiling height will need to be reduced a bit, but not in your main living spaces like your living rooms and bedrooms, etc. So, to summarize, we have, you know, provided you today with a lot of information, a lot to take in, and you will need some time to digest all this information. But you know, I'm going to mention here today also sort of the tiers of improvements that are referenced in our feasibility report that will be available later on for everyone. But there are like three tiers of improvements, like the bronze, the silver, and the gold. The bronze is basically no insulation to walls, roofs, etc., and just more like cosmetic repairs and repairs of the heating system or the windows, and maybe redecoration works, and that will be sort of that bronze tier. Then the silver will imply the things that I mentioned today, new wall insulation, either internal or external, the triple glazed windows, the roof insulation, and the mechanical ventilation with a recovery. And the gold standard is exactly the same as the silver, but with the addition of PVs on the roof and battery storage. And that is the one that will take us to the net zero carbon standards or goal that the Lancaster West team has for the state as a whole. So, but to achieve goal and really the PVs to be able to offset we need to reduce the heating demand massively, and by that we need to eliminate or reduce as much as possible the heat losses, as I mentioned before. So in terms of next steps, your opinion matters, and we would like to hear more from you in terms of, do you have any initial ideas, concerns, or questions for us to consider? And what more information do you think you would need to come to a decision on different building elements? Again, if there are any burning questions right now, you can write it in the chat, and then we can also then continue with later on.
Okay, so we're going to take 2 questions from the chat just before we move on to Janet's presentation. David Ward is asked, what's the efficiency of the heat recovery? That is, how much of the heat in the air, in the outflow, is transferred to the air in the inflow?
Okay, there are different efficiencies for different manufacturers. The Passive House standard requires that the unit is at least 75% efficient, but there are several units in the market that are above 85 and even higher. And that means that basically it requires a very little amount of electricity to produce, of energy. Let's talk about energy, because I'm going to talk about the inputs and the outputs. So basically it requires very little energy to work, the machine to work, and that's, you know, from electricity, very little. And the amount of heat that recovers and then pushes back into your flat, but fresh air, but that is preheated, it's massively. So it's a massive difference. So for example, if it's 85% efficient, then it means that it requires, say, like 15% of energy to produce, am I right? To produce the energy. So yes, James,
another question. How would the energy produced by PV be distributed fairly between flats?
Yes, well, that's a very good question, and that's a technical question that we haven't looked into. That's really for the M&E engineers and for the Lancaster West team to decide if the PVs are going to be used for communal areas or individually to flats, and that has some, you know, technical issues to be solved really in terms of converters and like how the system works. I don't know if anyone else from the Lancaster West team has any comments on that.
James Caspel, do you?
Hello, yeah, so great question, David. So we're going to talk a little bit later about the heat network and the interplay there. Obviously, in terms of the first PV panels we've put on is in Verity Close for a tenanted home, and it's just for that home. I think a lot of it will depend on the technical feasibility. So with PVs for the blocks we're talking about tonight, we need to consider can the roof structurally take it, and so on and so forth. So I think it will very much depend on what's technically feasible, what residents wouldn't like us to do, and then certainly in terms of the future of the heat network as we electrify that and move away from gas, which Janet will talk about a little bit later. We are at the moment consulting with the residents of Camelford Court. We've secured some grant funding specifically for their roof, and whether they want to bring in a combination of a green roof and potentially PV as well. In that case, it would be primarily for the communal electricity, because as you rightly said, David, in terms of if it goes into properties, is how do you do that in a way that's fair? So I think the likelihood is we would want to use it for communal plants such as air source heat pumps that would provide the heating and hot water to all of you, and of course in line with legislation that would have to be meters on any new system we bring in. So the opportunity, I guess, is to reduce the cost of paying for additional electricity from the wider grid to provide you with your heat and hot water or your communal electricity.
Great, thanks, James. So let's carry on with the presentation and take more questions afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of next steps, there are still some surveys that we need to carry out, and we really need your help, and we need to work together on this as part of the co-design. We need to be partners on the design of the refurbishment, but also because basically we need access to your flats so we can understand what solutions are the best and how to implement them, and how is the layout of each individual flats, particularly in terms of the ventilation, etc. So we really, I'm going to explain the different types of surveys required, but you know, they will all be done in a safe way and following all health and safety protocols. So the 4 types of surveys that we still require are these 4 that I'm going to mention now. So the first one is a survey of a top floor flat. And that would, for now, we just need 1 flat, so 1 volunteer. So if you live in a top floor flat and you're here today, please, it would be great if we can have a look at your ceiling on the top floor, because we need to open up a small section of your ceiling of the plasterboard. And you can see here the dimension is quite small, really, to inspect the spacing between the rafters. We need to understand how often they are and like the distance basically between them, so we can understand how much the existing roof can take on in terms of load, and in terms, you know, for the works that we're proposing. And then that will be sealed again and decorated back again. And this is something that can be done in a day with really minimal disruption. And that's, so if there are any takers, feel free to comment on the chat or get in touch with the Lancaster West team if you can perhaps assist with this. It can be either in Morland House or in Talbot Grove House. Okay. The second type of surveys that we need to do is a survey of the inside of the flats. As I mentioned before, particularly to be able to design the ventilation system and to calculate to a high level degree of accuracy the heat losses and how how the blocks are performing, how your flats are performing. We need to carry out a measure survey. So we've done this already on the outside walls and the communal areas, and you may have seen the surveyors already a couple of months ago. But now we need to understand the inside of some of the flats. This is done by beams of light, like, you know, like this machine here that you can see in the picture. And it's really quiet and fast, and only one surveyor will need to go into your flat, and it will take only like approximately 5 to 10 minutes per room. And they have confirmed all strict COVID-19 protocols they will follow, and health and safety procedures as well. And you can either stay in your flat, keeping 2 meters away from the surveyor, or wait outside the flat in the walkway, or in a different room as you prefer. And the results will allow us to understand the floor to ceiling heights and the internal layouts, as I said, and we really need this. So we really need at least one flat per each type. So we need a flat in the ground floor, in the middle floors, on the top floor, and at the ends of the blocks and in the middle of the blocks. And we need studio flats, 1-bedroom flats, 2-bedroom flats, 3-bedroom flats. So we need one of each. So the more people that can volunteer for this, the better, because we need to have a good sample of all the different types of flats that there are in the 2 different blocks. The third type of, oh, great, we have some volunteers. Good, thank you.
There's also some questions backing up, I think. We could go
sorry. Let me have I'll go to, oops, should I stop here for a second and go to the questions?
I think so. We've got the first good news. So Andrew has kindly volunteered, which is great.
Thanks.
The question there around the 25%, sorry, £25,000 per flat, is that for council and leaseholder? And yes, it is. So that is an average. Now, the other good news for any leaseholders in the room is a condition of this additional funding is that we can't charge any element that is in the scope of the project. So should you choose to go forward with triple glazing, there is no cost impact whatsoever. In fact, we wouldn't charge for any of it, whereas normally going from single to double you would, and then if you were to go to triple, we would not charge the difference. So in terms of any of these measures, because I know one of the concerns for leaseholders is, you know, the higher the standard, they're worried about costs. Is not only would they all be regarded as an improvement, but they wouldn't be rechargeable. Sorry,
Okay.
do you want to take us through the rest of the questions?
Yeah, so Gocha, cladding the outside of the building would be as technically challenging as insulating the external walls from the inside. So that's a question. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a comment, but I would agree with that. It's technically challenging, but both options are doable. But it really depends on what you all prefer as the way forward in terms of disruption and generally the different pros and cons that we discussed today.
Right. Thanks, Lorena. And let's see, Zach's, what's going to happen to our internal fittings? Will the wallpapers and other parts damaged by these refurbishment works be repaired back to the existing and higher standards?
Could I pick that one up, please, Boomy? So thanks, Alessia. Another really good question. So I think as Loriana set out, if we look at the choice between internal and external insulation, internal insulation is significantly more disruptive and reduces the size of your rooms as well. We would, if you were to select that, we would definitely make good, as we call it in the housing trade, which means to redecorate and to a much higher standard would typically be the case. So we wouldn't just sort of paint the bit of the ceiling that's been disrupted. We would make sure that the room looks good and potentially better as well. What I would say though is that diminishes the budget, because we would need to factor that in. It would mean that for our leaseholders, we would end up in some cases having to do works in a leasehold property that normally wouldn't be paid for. And ultimately this is all out of your pot. So we can explore all of that moving forwards, but what we would offer, and Morland House residents hopefully will be familiar shortly with our property refurbishment choice brochure, which outlines the range of things like carpets, flooring, paint, finishes and so on. So we would definitely bring that in. We wouldn't leave it to any resident to make good any disruption to the decorative finish of your home.
Great, thanks, James. Another question from David Ward. For residents in the top flats, would any decision need to be unanimous regarding changes to the roof, since they are the ones that are going to experience all of the disruption? Lorena?
I think that's a question maybe for James Caspel.
Right, excellent question. Yeah, I come with you. Yeah, so what we're looking to at this stage is to, and I know also Andrea wants to come in terms of the format and things, because we do want to, hear about how do we best engage and take this forward, because there's a hell of a lot of information and we've done a lot of talking today. But so I think what we'll want to do is, where possible, if we can build a consensus, and we did that with Treadgold House in terms of an opportunity to secure some funding which required external wall insulation, and in that case we did have to use voting, but we only want to bring voting in where there's a genuine choice and there's a clear choice, and we feel that residents have had all the information that they need. But to answer the question directly, no. A decision wouldn't need to be unanimous in regards to the roof or any other element of the building. And whilst we will do all we can to address any concerns, and I think the likely concern in terms of disruption is one around our respite offer, which could be helping people move to another home temporarily, helping people benefit from the refurbishment decant scheme. Maybe they'd rather stay at friends and family. Maybe we need to help with storage. Hopefully, as restrictions ease, certainly towards the summer, we'll be able to finally, get outside and use our community centres again. So it may not be the case that we can get everybody to agree with every aspect of the building. We'll do our very best to do that. And it may well be the case of mitigating those risks. So if, for example, 9 out of 10 people on the top floor said this is what we want to happen, we wouldn't defer to the one person who would rather it didn't, bluntly.
Great. Thanks, James. We have another question from Gocha. So what is the achieved added value thermally through insulating the external wall?
That's a great question from Gocha. Really, because insulating the blocks from the outside will eliminate or greatly reduce the thermal bridges that I was talking about. If we only insulate from the inside, I'm going to try to look at a slide to explain my point here. If we, one sec. You can see here that if we only insulate from the inside, although we can perhaps insulate around the floors, it will require like opening up the edges of the floors as well if we are to try to reduce the thermal bridge where the floors connect to the external walls. If we insulate from the outside, everything is like, you know, it's covered, all the external walls and the gutters that I mentioned as well. Otherwise, you know, you have all these sort of thermal bridges. So from a technical perspective, it's better to insulate from the outside. There's also something called interstitial condensation, that if the insulation is to be applied to the inside, it needs to be really carefully done. And all sort of calculations and measurements will need to be made just to make sure that there's no risk of that. Basically, condensation between the different, the insulation and you can see here, basically condensation could appear here if it's not done correctly. But the types of insulation that we were proposing are like breathable, etc. But so yes, from a technical perspective, if you're, I don't know if what your question is, added value thermally through insulating the external wall means is like, what else, you know, what additional value? The other additional value is, you know, an opportunity to change the looks of the building. It cannot, there are different sort of options. We can try to replicate the existing brickwork and the patterns of the brickwork, or we can go with something different or try to incorporate color bricks or a render finish in some areas, for example, in the walkways. You know, there are different elements to look at here. But yes, I don't know if I understood your question correctly or.
You must have compliance officer for social media. You must have a nodal contact person. You must have a resident grievance officer, all residing in India, and you must give a monthly compliance report.
And I would also like, sorry, yes. Is that what you meant with the question, or was it something else? Like other reasons to choose, external wall. Okay. And I would also like to read a message here from Mark Allen, who is our external safe principal designer, also external safety consultant from the Risk UK, and they are appointed across all projects to plan, monitor, and manage health and safety during the pre-construction stage. And this means that all designs and planning processes are monitored to ensure that the safety of residents and all persons affected by the works, including architects, surveyors, maintenance teams, and contractors, etc., are as safe as possible. I'd be pleased to take any questions through ECDA, that's us, if required. That's a message from Mark here today. Hi, Mark. Good to see you here, or read you. And yes, so I'll go back to the slide where we left it. Okay, this one. We also need volunteers for a thermal and humidity survey, and this would require basically placing inside your flats a very small sensor, like you can see here, that will monitor your humidity and temperature levels. And it should be around at least 3 weeks. But if that's something that we need to discuss with the provider who is Build Test Solutions, because maybe it would be a good idea to actually monitor for a longer period through the summer to understand overheating in your properties as well. So just to explain, Build Test Solutions are monitoring thermal and energy data across the whole Lancaster West Estate. They are working in the other blocks as well. And it would be great to understand how the occupied flats are performing. They are already installing this in Treadgold House, and there's a video on Instagram explaining the process. The installation should take about 5 to 10 minutes. And it's, a tiny sensor that you can see there. And they are also going to be carrying out other surveys in empty flats in the block. So there will be a thermal conductivity of walls and air permeability tests, etc. But those will be carried out in empty flats. Someone said, happy to have a thermal sensor. My flat overheats in the winter and the summer. Yes, if it overheats in the winter, then it's basically the district heating system is just chucking lots of energy and heat into your properties, and lots of carbon emitted. Okay, so people are starting to leave, so let's move on. All right, the final one is an external thermographic survey, and that basically help to identify problems of the external walls and the windows and thermal bridges, as I mentioned before, and it's by using an infrared camera to reveal the differences in surface temperatures and specific areas with high heat losses. And these areas are where heat is lost, can cause cold spots, as I mentioned, and can lead to condensation. This is very quick and non-disruptive. It's done from the outside. We don't really need volunteers for that, but I'm mentioning this just in case you see the team working in the next few weeks, taking photographs from the outside with the thermographic cameras, and also a drone. So I wanted to mention it today, just in case you see a drone in the next few weeks, flying around, trying to look at those inaccessible areas like the top floors, walls, and the roof on top to really understand how the different elements are losing heat. The flats need to have a 10-degree temperature difference between the inside and the outside, so the surveys really need to be done when the weather is cool outside. And we will need to ask you to keep your flats warm with the heating on, and keep the windows closed as well. So there are no errors when if a window is open, then it will look warmer than it should really be, because if it's closed, it's different. So now I will.
Thanks a lot, Lorena. That was very good. I'm just conscious of time because it's already 6:30, and I wonder if everyone is happy for us to carry on. If you put your answers in the chat, or just say, if you're happy for us to carry on, and we'll continue. Yep, it's quiet. Okay, I guess that's a yes. I mean, no one is saying no. Janet, do you want to come in and just quickly run through your slides?
Yeah, I'll keep it super brief. I think I've only got 3 slides in total, so hopefully I won't be too long. My name's Janet Hull. I have been appointed to the Lancaster West Neighbourhood Team, along with a few other of my colleagues who are all specialists within heat networks. So we are looking at what possible solutions we might realise for the heating refurbishment across the estate in each block and for your flat specifically. So to give you a bit of an introduction to how the estate is heated today, you will see the walkways and Morland House and Talbot Grove to the top right of the slide are currently heated on something called a heat network. And this is currently supplied by a gas boiler. So Morland House and Talbot Grove House are getting heat from an energy centre based in Camelford Court, which is just opposite where the cardboard recycling area is. And you mightn't have ever noticed it unless you've needed it for some reason. And we are looking at a way of changing off the gas boiler onto a renewable heat source, energy source. So next slide. And this is just a bit of an explanation as to what a heat network is. It is basically plumbing at a very large scale. So we have one energy centre that serves multiple buildings. And there is, as I'm sure you are more aware of than any of us working on the project, that there's a need to refurbish the existing heating systems that are not working as they should be. I know in Morland House, I think it was a specific priority area. I think it was number 2 on the list. So we want to find something that works much better and works with the refurbishment. So we're working with the internal and the external teams to look at how we can actually deliver this project and better heating. Next slide. So just like the rest of the refurbishment, we're also looking to do a co-design process for the heating. So this month, next month, we have lots of technical teams kind of trying to figure out what is possible for the estate. In the walkways, this team were putting heat meters effectively into the local sewers to see what heat we can actually take from wastewater. We're also looking at air source heat and ground source heat to see what renewable sources we can actually use for the project. And when we've got the results from that, we will then put the options on the table and present those to residents of each block throughout the estate. And we'll get your feedback on what you think could work and where the areas of priority are for you. So whether that's kind of getting the controls right or when we're actually doing this project and so on. Next slide. And I don't know if you've seen this in the last week, it should have popped through your doors. We have a survey that's out at the moment, which looks at what your priorities are, what we need to improve in terms of heating. And if you can fill that out, make sure your neighbours fill that out. It would be really useful starting point for us taking the designs forward and speaking to the engineering teams. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Next slide, please. Lorena, do you want to? You're mute. Lorena, you're still muted.
Yes, I had a thing. Okay. So in terms of continuing the conversation today and over the next few weeks, we want to discuss your thoughts, ideas, and concerns about insulation options, internal or external, as I mentioned, for walls and roofs, and the other elements that we discussed today as well, about the windows, for example. We also want to, the co-design meetings will focus on preferred options as they emerge. We will assess with you how much disruption is acceptable in exchange of the benefits of the design proposals. And we have already carried out several surveys, but we need to work together to carry out further surveys to understand the existing condition of your homes. So thank you very much to those that have offered to volunteer their flats for this. That's really great. And others that may want to get in touch with the Lancaster West team directly, that would be great as well. In terms, next slide. So before our next meeting, we are going to share with you a letter explaining what we have done so far and today. This presentation will be available, a feasibility report that we have produced for those who want to read it. And we're going to organize a pop-up event just to chat and go through any questions that you may have in person. And yes, we'll give the details of this. The Lancaster West team will provide the details about how we can organize this in the next few weeks.
Thanks.
Did you want to say something about the newsletter?
Yes, so I wanted to let everyone know about the e-newsletter for residents of the estate, and that we launched in October 2020. So it's the best way to keep up to date with all the refurbishment news on the estate. You can either scan the QR code or follow the link in the chat. Linda, you could please put the link in the chat. And there are also posters up on all the notice boards around the estate with the QR code. And you can also find it on our Instagram bio. So when you sign up, you have the option of putting which block you live in. And this is really useful, you know, if we move the block newsletters in the future, if we move to the block newsletter in the future. So a recording, just to note that a recording of this meeting will be going on our YouTube channel and also embedded in our We're W11 app, which you can download from the App Store and on our website. So if you have any further questions about the presentation or comments or ideas, or if there are any concerns you have, then do get in touch with the Lanc West team. I believe there's an email address on the last slide, Loriana. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, if there are any questions, get in touch. And thank you so much, you know, for joining us today. Very, very good questions, great questions, and thanks, Loriana.
Can I respond to one that I got, you know, a bit distracted by the chat when I was trying to respond. Someone asked about the efficiency of the MVHR, and just to briefly explain, like if it's 78, 75 or 85% efficient, it means that it will recover like 85% of the heat in the air in your flat will be recovered. So basically, most of the heat will be recovered with fresh air and it's not going to be lost through the external walls, just to clarify that. I don't think I made my point earlier. So yes, if there are any final questions, either you can speak now or send it in the chat or in the email address that's here.
Yes. Any questions, final thoughts from anyone? No? Well, thank you all for joining us. Very, very useful, you know, session, you know, questions and the presentation, great presentation from ECD. Thank you so much. And yes, if you have any questions, do get in touch with the Lanc West team. Thank you all. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.